21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
My name is Vitaly Golomb. I'm the partner at Drakestar Partners, which is a global investment bank. I run the San Francisco operation. I head up the US mobility practice as well, and I focus on the future of transportation. We're about actually 50-50 US and Europe. Drakestar Partners is about 100 bankers, and we have 26 partners. I'm one of them. And we have 9 offices in 6 countries at this point. And we focus on tech M&A as well as corporate finance, so raising capital, typically for companies that are a little bit later in their path and growth stages and beyond. We're now even playing around with SPACs, as many are as well, especially in transportation mobility sector. We see a lot of companies becoming valuable very quickly compared to before, and going to the public markets rather earlier than before. So it's a very exciting time. I worked, in Croatia, of course, with Rimac, put together Series B a few years back, local hero. At the time, that was the biggest venture round in Southern Europe at that point. And that was a great, challenging project, but very proud to be a part of it. And now the company, of course, is doing very well, is one of the leaders in electric mobility in the world. Still have lots and lots of friends in Croatia, and can't wait to get back to Croatia. It's been a while. Mobility sector is really fascinating. I've always been a car guy, so that's kind of how I got into it. But in reality, it is a very interesting, it's one of the biggest categories around of business, of industry out there. It's a $5 trillion category, and it's going through a massive transformation right now, generational transformation.
Excuse me, how much?
5 trillion.
5 trillion? Wow.
Yeah. So transportation, logistics, all of that is a massive industry. And the transformation, what happened last year in 2020 is that electric mobility became inevitable, right? It was a question of when and how and if. There's no longer a question. Everybody understands that we're going electric. So it's just a question of now, how will the industry reorient around that idea? We're going to have a massive amount of new vehicles coming out, passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles that are electric. And we're going to see hydro very soon. We're going to see hydrogen fuel cell aircraft in a few years. We're going to see Hyperloop break ground probably this year and start building the first one. And you'll see passengers, demonstration lines, and real Hyperloop systems in the next couple of years. That's another company that I'm working with closely, Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. So very interesting category, very important. We're probably realistically 5 to 10 years away from real autonomy. To be honest, despite what Tesla likes to advertise, it's not true. They didn't have 1 million self-driving taxis by the end of last year, as we know. And realistically, it's going to take a few more years for us to see real autonomy on the street. But very exciting because companies like Zoox, companies like Waymo, for passengers will create kind of a new reality. In big cities, you won't need to own a car, period. You just call this electric thing that takes you wherever you want to go autonomously. It'll be really cheap compared to owning a car and insurance and parking and everything else. So that's going to be really exciting. And what we're doing for CES this year, Drakestar Partners mobility team, we're putting on a 2.5-hour online event on January 13th from 9 a.m. Pacific. And you can find details on that if you find Drakestar Partners on LinkedIn. You can see the event there. It's free registration. And we're going to be hosting some of the leaders in this category for several different panels. Talk about as far as government infrastructure and the government incentives that are driving this. So government regulations and incentives are still 2 of the biggest drivers in EV. It's not individual companies. We're going to talk about that with European Investment Bank, with the co-chair of Biden's subcommittee on infrastructure. For the US, we're also going to be hosting the CEOs of Damon Motorcycles and Einride from Sweden, the autonomous electric truck company, Monarch tractor that just launched a few weeks ago, which is autonomous farming platform in a electric tractor. as well as QEV Tech and one of the co-founders of Remac. And a special guest hasn't confirmed yet, unfortunately, but there'll be a very big name, hopefully. A few hours after we finish this recording, I'll have the confirmation as well. So it'll be a great event. And it's for people that are already involved in the industry or are curious about the industry. It's a totally free event. So by all means, look up Drakestar Partners on LinkedIn, find the link, and we'll see you there.
Anyway, how long did it take for you becoming a partner?
I have a very...
Was it a tough road?
No, I have a very non-traditional path to investment banking. I started out, I was always the youngest guy doing pretty much everything. I was the youngest employee of Kinko's when I was a teenager back in high school. I was running a design team for a software startup, an enterprise software startup back in the dot-com days. And I wasn't old enough to go to the bar with my team. And after that, I started and ran 3 of my own companies. The last one was venture-backed, was a software company. I built an engineering office in Kyiv, Ukraine. I was born originally in Odessa, Ukraine, and my family immigrated when I was 8 years old to San Francisco. So I grew up in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a non-traditional path. So, once I sold that last company in 2015, I was already working with a number of venture funds as an advisor and accelerators around the world. I joined the team at HP to help build HP Tech Ventures, the corporate venture arm for Hewlett Packard. And HP, of course, is Silicon Valley's original startup. So that was a very interesting experience that I spent a couple of years there. And from there, during that time, I published my book. The Remac deal came together finally around that time. And I left and started my own boutique investment bank, JS Capital, a couple of years ago, almost 3 years ago now. And that grew relatively quickly. I got involved in more and more of these bigger deals. So with companies like Fisker, advising them on their capital raise while they were still a private company, Hyperloop, Damon Motorcycles, which is being called the Tesla of motorcycles these days. And very quickly that practice grew, and it made sense for me to join up with Drakestar, which is one of the leaders in this space, investment banks in the world. And now I'm part of a mobility group that's about 20 plus people in total, with a big group in Amsterdam and London, as well as New York. So working on very interesting projects in charging infrastructure, in electric mobility, the different vehicles, different component technology, autonomy, or be it battery technology. So lots of really interesting things. And we're for CES, for this virtual CES 2021, we're actually holding a big mobility event with some of our key partners, customers, would-be customers, and some involvement from government officials as well, European Investment Bank, as well as one of our advisors to Drakestar, who was the co-chair of Biden's subcommittee on infrastructure in the US. So we're expecting really interesting things to happen in this particular sector in the US, starting this year with the new administration. That's going to be very focused on environment and infrastructure and creating jobs. All those things come together very nicely to solve a lot of problems.
I was working for a PR company at Broadway Street in 1999 in San Fran, and there was the dot-com bubble. So for how long did it take to reset the macroeconomic system back then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough now to have gone through 3 major cycles and a lot of minor cycles in Silicon Valley. Of course, when my family immigrated and landed in San Francisco in 1990, US was in a somewhat of a recession already at that period. Big real estate recession as well. So I remember kind of growing up in the 90s, and things really improved under the Clinton administration. That's the last time the US had a surplus in the budget, a long time ago in the 90s, and it was handed off. So the dot-com bubble was a really interesting experience. It was a first experience for me, and I didn't really have anything to compare to. I was quite young. When it ended, it was like, like a bomb went off. There was no traffic on Highway 101 here for a couple of years. That was nice. But of course, in Bay Area, population is around 8 million. Something like 25% of people work directly in technology related companies. So I don't think I knew a single, let's say if it was a couple, I didn't know a single couple where at least one person wasn't laid off. So it was felt really strongly here because it was very concentrated here. The bubble expanded and blew up, and a lot of people moved away. I think things started coming back with social media around 2004, 2005. And we had a nice little bump, Facebook opening up here and growing very quickly, and kind of that whole generation of companies coming about. Google went public not too long before that and was growing quickly. So you could see these things kind of bubbling up again. The financial crisis, 2008, 2009, it didn't hit Bay Area as hard as other parts, I would say. Definitely not as bad as the dot-com bubble in 2001. But we definitely felt it here. Real estate prices fell. It wasn't easy. But then we very quickly saw from, let's say, 2011, 12, grew very, very quickly. It felt like another bubble. And 2015 felt like a peak. So then, we've maintained this level of investment and all of this hype and everything happening and all the unicorns, that's when the name started being thrown around, all of that, all the way into the beginning of this year. And then the dynamic change. So what's quite interesting is a lot of people are talking about, it's the end of San Francisco, Silicon Valley is not relevant. I have a different perspective on that because I've been through these different cycles. They are, things are a little bit different this time, but they're much more the same. So if you look at statistics on venture investment, Silicon Valley did not lose much. I think it actually gained last year compared to the year before that, as far as percentage of venture capital, at least in the US. But the nice thing, and I say this is nice, even coming from Silicon Valley, I see it as a friendly competition, is that you saw a lot of other ecosystems, especially in Europe, set records for venture investment. So it's not so much that you see people just getting on a plane and flying to San Francisco as soon as they can, but they're doing whatever they can wherever they are, which I see as a huge positive. But it doesn't take anything away from Silicon Valley. Don't be confused. We've been doing this here for 70 years. And this type of venture investment and this type of ecosystem, it's not going away. Nobody's going to take away Silicon Valley. Now, you see a few companies announcing that they're moving their headquarters, and all they're really doing is changing their official address because they're going to pay less taxes. And they're not closing offices and moving people away. They're not doing any of that. They're just moving their tax headquarters to another state to pay less, which I see as, first of all, that's really negative for the company because that's really optimization strategy. That really means to me, that's a signal that they're out of ideas and they don't see big growth in their near future. They're trying to find other ways to create more revenue, more profit. That's one thing. The other thing is that that's really negative because they've taken advantage of, let's say, California resources, the education system that produce people here, all of these things that are invested by the state and by tax funds, and they don't pay their fair share, right? It's this over-optimization. And you see companies doing that, going state by state, or then moving their headquarters to another country. In US, there are laws where they can capture the taxes, but in other countries, especially in Europe, there are loopholes where you see a lot of companies pay zero tax. So that's the way I see it. And then you see a couple of people, moving away and announcing that they're moving to Miami. It's like, okay, great. Well, that's also nothing new. People understand they come to Bay Area to work, to build a career, but it's always been kind of a boring place. And for lifestyle, it's nothing that special. Cultural, events here don't compare to New York or London. You come here to work and you go on vacation somewhere else. So if you're a billionaire, if you've already made all your money and you want to change your lifestyle and you want to live on the beach, fantastic, go for it. But Keith or Boy, moving to Miami and saying everybody's going to leave Silicon Valley and move to Miami, I think that's a complete joke. I have respect for what he's achieved, but he's in a complete startup founders that are they have no money and just dreams and no resume and nothing. They have a lot less in common with him, and him buying a $30 million house on Miami Beach. Good for him. Larry Ellison bought an island in Hawaii, an entire island of Lanai. So completely different, right? It's unrelated. And the message I want to send to entrepreneurs, to founders, especially young founders just starting out, you have nothing in common with these people. You should go to where your industry is, where the ecosystem is, where investors are, where people like you are coming to grow their companies and learn how to build a business. When 20 years from now you retire and you have all the money in the world, go find a nice beach to live on and enjoy your life.
By the way, are there any common KPIs for those kind of companies? For startups that were not going so well, you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so what happened last year, if you look at venture investment, is there's a lot more money that went in, but when you start looking at where it went into revenue companies and later stage deals, much bigger deals. So you see like a huge bubble of valuations at later stages go up because those are it's money chasing these deals because they're seen as safer deals. But it became much more difficult for pre-revenue seed stage companies to raise capital in Bay Area or elsewhere. So that's something to keep in mind for sure.
How did you cope with all those cycles? I mean, do you meditate, working out? Is it a mindset, something else, all of it?
I'll break news on your podcast here. My next book is going to be called "What I Learned in My 30s." So on career, health, and relationships, I learned a lot in my 30s. I'm turning 40 this year, and
congrats.
Thank you. I almost made it so far.
You will.
I will, I hope. So it's I definitely didn't deal well with the stresses of being a founder. Something that I like to talk about when I'm on stage and talking to founders or mentoring founders is that mental health aspect of starting a company is very, very important and something that doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of times founders are so engrossed with their startups, especially if they're young and they start and they have nothing this is the only thing they're doing. This is how they define themselves. If it's not going well, it's going to affect them personally because their identity is the same as their company. And if the company's not doing well, they take it very personally. When in reality, a much healthier way to think about this is it's a scientific experiment. Scientists don't get depressed because an experiment that has a low likelihood of working out doesn't work out, right? Startups have a very low chance of success rate. And if it doesn't work out, you just need to go quickly and move on, right? So you don't waste your life and have such a negative impact. At some point for most, unfortunately, our mothers are right? In most cases, people should just go get a normal job, quote unquote. But those that choose this path need to be very disciplined and very healthy. One thing is get enough sleep, do get exercise, eat well, try to reduce, minimize travel. That's a mistake that I made. I've done, my maximum year was something like 300,000 miles, 26 countries in 1 year. Unhealthy things. I don't have, a drinking habit or a drug habit or anything like that, but some people do. That's how they cope. I watch what I eat, but with the pandemic, the nice silver lining was that sitting at home with a home gym and eating well and not traveling and sleeping well, all those things are positive. And it's something that I intend to continue. And people really need to understand that, don't delay things, don't put them off, don't put off your health, don't compromise. All those things are going to make you a stronger founder if you take care of yourself and take care of those around you. Rather than the reverse, right? Don't cut corners. Don't do 7 days a week for months and months and months. There's crunch mode and then there's normal mode. Just remember, that you're doing this because you want to solve the problem, but also because this is something that you should be enjoying doing. You should be doing it so you can retire and do other things and enjoy your life because you only get one.
By the way, it's still a high suicide rate in California. And plus, there are a lot of people taking drugs and having all kinds of weird 24-hour rhythm habits.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a coping mechanism for a lot of people. They don't know how to deal with this. Especially, I would say probably on average, startup founders tend to be extroverts. And when you lock up extroverts to sit at home and all they can do is stare at their computer screen for a while and they don't have that interaction with people, people get really, really unstable and they find different ways to cope. So yeah, hopefully most people choose healthier habits. And when we look outside of our little tech bubble, all these other industries and all these other categories and all that, and just traditional people working normal jobs, police officers and teachers and what have you, they have a lot of stresses. And just like right now, I have 2 kids in the house doing Zoom school still. And just managing all that is very stressful for people. And in a lot of cases, they don't have the luxury of, taking time off or relaxing or having a home gym or proper organic food or what have you. So it's definitely a problem. So we'll see how things change once, vaccines are more prevalent and lockdowns go down and we can start returning to normal, hopefully by this summer. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue all across the board.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
A little bit more on the event. We're going to have 2 sessions. The first session is going to be the state of the advanced EV and autonomous mobility industry as of right now. We're actually going to publish a large report that we do annually on the state of the industry, which we're also going to put out there. It's going to be about 150, 160 page report that talks about the different technology where we are really right now with electrical mobility, with autonomous mobility, with different regulations. We also have an almanac of what all the big companies are doing in this space. So I think that will be very useful for anybody curious and interested to really understand, it'll be a book on its own to really understand where the industry is today. And then I can tell you the first panel, we're going to have a great discussion with a number of leading up-and-comers in electric and autonomous mobility. So Giraud, I mentioned, founder and CEO of Damon Motorcycles, will be with us. Robert Falck, founder and CEO of Einride from Sweden. Praveen Penmetsa, CEO and founder of Monarch Tractor, and Monica Mikak, Chief Business Officer of QEV Tech, who is also part of the founding team at Rimac. And we also have one more special guest on that panel. The second session we're going to be doing on EV charging infrastructure and the successful impact of government stimulus. This across different countries, different regions. In China, this has been a huge driver, the government stimulus and government regulations. Same thing in Europe. And we're expecting fully that in the US, with the new administration, there's going to be a massive push behind this. Infrastructure, green infrastructure is going to be a massive jobs program. And if successful, in their top 10 list of things they're trying to achieve, they're going to be, it's going to be the signature policy for Biden, at least in the first 4 years. So we'll see how that goes. So some of the guests there, we have Marc Joseph, as I mentioned, he's CEO of Mobitas Advisors and the co-chair of the infrastructure committee for Biden. Francois Gaudet, head of thematic impact finance operations at European Investment Bank. Vic Shao, founder CEO of Ampli Power. Marc Bedard, founder CEO of the Lion Electric Company that is going to be public via SPAC very shortly here. And Bob Bouhuijs, I hope I pronounced his name right, CEO of Heliox Technology, and a few others. And from our team, so I will be hosting the first part along with one of my associate vice presidents out of Drake Star New York office, Lyle Finkler. And the second part will be hosted by our colleagues in Amsterdam, Frank Verbeek, Dominique Hod, and Sherry Fahim. So that's how our team kind of splits up this event. So it should be a great event. We'll also, for those that can't make the whole 2.5 hours, we will post a recording later. So I encourage everybody to register regardless. And you'll also get a copy of our mobility report as soon as it gets through compliance and becomes available. So that's a little bit about the event itself. And generally, it's pretty easy to find me online, golomb.net. My website, if somebody is contemplating a project, if they're getting into growth stages, and obviously I speak software and e-commerce and AI and other sectors, not just mobility. I just focus most of my time on mobility these days, as it's kind of an area that I specialize in. But I did spend most of my career in software side. I have a degree in design. I'm a designer by profession to start with. So here I am.
Oh, beautiful. So left brain, right brain at the same time, and bridge
something like that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. When I was in school, I wanted to be a professional musician. I'm really glad that I got into business early, because all my professional musician friends are they're a little bit broke, unfortunately. Unless you're Britney Spears, it's a little bit tough. So
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and that's something that I want to, kind of coming back to this personal idea, right? It's I want to spend more time on creative pursuits, as I get older, and spend more time on things I enjoy and creating things, and writing books as an outlet, doing podcasts of my own, and and being a guest and doing public speaking and doing a lot of design projects these days, not for clients anymore for a long time, but my presentations and things. I enjoy that for sure.
Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed today's show, please head over to iTunes, give us a rating, and leave a review.